Hello, everybody. Welcome to this next session of Mobile Coach User Conference. It's great to have you all here. This is the training reinforcement use case session. Delighted to have you here. Just some housekeeping before we get started with the session. We will be monitoring both the chat and the Q&A. Note that on Zoom, this is kind of a weird quirk of Zoom, but when you go into the chat, it defaults to hosts and panelists. And of course, if you have a chat, we'd all love to see what you're chatting about. So please change that to everyone. And then you can use the Q&A and we'll monitor that as well. Also, as a housekeeping note, the recording of this session, as well as the accompanying slides, will be posted later this afternoon on the conference website. So with that, I am delighted to be able to introduce my colleague, Corey Richards. She has been with Mobile Coach for, I think, 7 years now, and started out as a chatbot designer, then a senior chatbot designer, and now just knows everything about the Mobile Coach platform, and runs our marketing and our partner program, as well as still very involved in many of our chatbot projects. And so, Corey, this is your session.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Make sure the tech is working. Okay, and I just need to pop open my chat so I don't miss anything. Welcome to the session. I'm going to fast forward to our agenda for today. So we are going to be talking about training reinforcement for chatbots. And specifically, I am going to focus on the design of these chatbots. So how different pieces need to be designed when you're thinking about a reinforcement bot. We're going to start by talking about what these chatbots are, when it might be appropriate to use it, things you can look out for, a couple of example use cases. So I'll take those first two items and show you them within two different example use cases. And then we're going to talk about a couple of best practices and channel integration, and then reporting and Q&A. So we've got a lot to cover. So I'm going to talk not too quickly. I know I can get into such a monologue. So please stop me if you have questions in the chat. Vince will monitor, but let's get going. Okay, so when is it that you want to use a training reinforcement chatbot? Well, I want everyone to imagine that someone goes through a training that you're delivering, and then right afterwards, you follow up with them on information. You check with them on how they're going to apply the content. You send them tips. You ask them questions. This would probably make sure that every one of your people were following through and remembering a lot more of the content than if they were just to leave and never hear from you again. But that is not very realistic. And so a chatbot can actually take on that role of an accountability partner, making it safe and feasible for someone to get that check-in, to get those reminders, to answer their questions, and to be there to make sure they're actually applying the content and keeping it outside of the classroom. So that's just a quick thought of what this could look like. But now I want you to try it for yourself. So if you haven't tried this chatbot before, it's a little demo about different messages that a chatbot for reinforcement could send. So in the chat, I've just put this information. If you want to use Microsoft Teams, you just click the link and then you say hi to the chatbot. And if you want to try it on SMS, you text hi to this phone number, and then the web, you just click. So I'm going to preview the web for everyone, just in case you're not near it and you can't look at it immediately. But feel free, as I'm doing this, to try it out yourself. So here we have Sam, who is going to show us 4 different ways a chatbot could engage learners. So let's try out provide resource. So I'm just going to click C here. And it's going to show us, okay, so here's a message that Sam could send.
Hey, Corey, I'm not seeing your chatbot if you're
my goodness,
planning on sharing it.
Of course. Yes, sorry, I am sharing.
There we go.
That's great. Here we go. Here's Sam. Okay, walking back. Sam says hi. We've got 4 different examples that we could send. And then I chose this reminder. So you could imagine 2 weeks after training, the chatbot stepping in and saying, hey, remember this piece of content, and then delivering it right to them on SMS or Microsoft Teams or something like that. Now, Okay, let's move forward. Hopefully everyone had a chance to try that demo. If not, it'll be in the slides later if you want to try it out as well and see the other 3 use cases. But when is it the right time to use this chatbot? So when do we want to utilize a training reinforcement chatbot? Because believe it or not, a chatbot is not always the right answer. With any new tech, I've seen a lot of people who say, hey, this is really cool, and we just want to use it. But if it's not going to fulfill a need that exists already, a chatbot could just be a cool tech, but maybe won't be as useful for your end users and those learners that you have. So we want to make sure that we're being purposeful and using a chatbot when there are a couple of these there. So we need a clear problem and a clear business case. So why are you using the chatbot? Is it to help people remember because they're leaving the training and they're not applying this important content you're giving them? Or is it because you need to prove that people are leaving the training and acting on it? So we want to know what are the problems we're solving so that one, the chatbot can be helpful for these learners. It can solve a problem for them. But also we can go back and afterwards and see, okay, this chatbot did help. It did solve this problem for us. And a reinforcement chatbot, it might be necessary if it's important that someone's going to remember and apply their training. So there's, I'm sure, a use case out there where maybe the training, we don't need to remember everything. I'm thinking there's a couple compliance trainings that maybe I fast forwarded through and I got everything I needed. Maybe I shouldn't say that out loud. But you get what you need and then you can move forward. You maybe don't need to remember everything. But then there are other trainings that are very important. They're really valuable and they're information that these learners really want as well. So they want to be able to remember and apply it. But maybe once they leave the classroom and they're back in their job, it's hard to keep up. It's hard to make sure that it becomes a habit. And so this can be where a chatbot is crucial and really useful for everyone. And another reason you might need to use a chatbot is engagement is difficult or non-existent. So I've heard of some cases where they're already doing a good job of reinforcing, or it's easy to check in on everyone because maybe it's a small team. And so you can already send quick messages to say, hey, Corey, what's happening with this? Have you applied it? But if that's not feasible, if you can't just check in with everyone, this again can be a great use case for a reinforcement chatbot and an indicator that, hey, maybe this would be helpful. Scaling as well. I kind of mentioned earlier that a chatbot is a great tool to scale. So if you need to scale, that can be another tip of, hey, a chatbot might be able to do this. And then the last one is users can chat. So they have the ability to get on Microsoft Teams and talk with their colleagues already. So it'd just be this frictionless piece to add in. Okay, so those are some indicators of when this might be the right answer. Let's look at 2 use cases to see when people chose this and what that looks like for them. So there's a lot of text on these slides. I wanted them to be a valuable use afterwards, so I'm not going to read all of this. But just as a recap, this is a reinforcement training that's actually a case study that we have. So I'll post the whole case study afterwards. Oh, yes, let us know if the demo didn't work. Thank you, Vince. But with this, Target chose to do a case study because they wanted to see, can we get leaders after they leave this training following through on actions more often? Because they had this important leadership training, and at the very end of the training, they asked people to create an action, and then 2 months later, they would follow up with them. And not very many people were remembering the action or accomplishing it. So they wanted to see if a chatbot could be more useful than just having people write it down. So let's look at what that looked like for them. So here is how the chatbot captured their goal. So I'm going to walk through some of the design and the actual user experience. So first, just to orient you at what you're looking at, on the left side here, we have the script. So this is actually how we're writing and designing a chatbot, is writing out the different messages and saying, okay, on Monday, it's going to send this. And then what happens if someone responds? And then we're going to ask a yes, no question. And then on this side, this is what it actually looks like for the end user. So it's a little different. You can see it's filling in that they're scheduling their regular one-on-ones. And for this chatbot, people left the training, and then on Monday, the chatbot came in and captured their goal. So it asked them, what is the visible action you're going to accomplish? People shared their actions with the chatbot. And then it checked in just to make sure they got it right. So this can be a good way when you're designing of, we need this information. It's important the chatbot has it right. So we're going to check in, make sure we got it right. And then once it was saved and the chatbot moved on. So this is how it captured the goal. And then it sent regular reminders. So over the course of 2 months, it would regularly follow up. And sometimes it would just say, hey, here's your goal. Don't forget it. And this time it was kind of a reminder with a check-in to see how well is this going. So to help them kind of assess for themselves and take that minute to reflect and see where they were at. So the chatbot asked this question of a 1 to 5 scale. And then based on their answers, it would say something different. So this can be a really great tool when designing a reinforcement chatbot to break out different possibilities of how do we want to ask someone this question so we get different responses, and then we can tailor the chatbot's response. So if they're not doing very well, we can give them some support, some assistance. If they're doing kind of in the middle, like they've gotten started, but they haven't gotten very far, we can give different assistance. And then if they're doing really well, we want to give them that congrats. We want them to see that they're really accomplishing something and are on their way. And so for this example, we see the chatbot sent the message, the person said they were a 3, and so it gave that response to them. And I wanted to show you, so I'm going to pause this really quick, and I wanted to show you that, these are some different ways to write the chatbot, but you don't have to come up with them all on your own. So I do have this script library that I wanted to show you really quick of. So you can think about, okay, as we're thinking about a reinforcement chatbot, what other ways, what other messages could it send? So I'm going to pop open on the Mobile Coach platform. We have this script library and we have 15 different training reinforcement scripts. So if I come over here to post-training goal tracker, so this is pretty similar to the target use case. And you can see, so if you wanted to go and see, okay, well, how is the rest of this built? Or what is more of this script? You can actually come here. If you have an author license, you can see this, or if you're just interested in a script, I can send that to you as well. And you can see, okay, so it's capturing the goal, here's a reminder, and the full script is written out. So you don't have to come up with each of these out of the blue. We do have templates to make it a lot easier for you. Okay, I have talked a lot. Any questions so far? I'm going to pause here before we go back to the slides. Any thoughts, questions? Yes. So Alan asked if we retain the scoring results for each individual and a summary. So there is a reporting dashboard on the platform where you can see how someone scored. So did they give it a 4, a 5? So you can see each individual's conversation and what's happening with them. And then you can also see summary data of, well, how did everyone do on this question and where are they rating themselves? And that kind of comes back to having a business problem and a business case in the very beginning, where it's a lot easier to determine, Alan, you mentioned measures of success. It's easier to determine what will these measures of success be when you're designing the script versus at the end when you're just looking at the raw data and the reports. So for this example, actually, that's a great segue back into our slides. So I'm going to share that portion again. Okay, so here are the results for this target case study. So for this one, it was really clear we want to compare someone remembering their goal. So that was one. We want to know, do they remember their goal when the chatbot checks in with them? And the second piece is, did they take action? So those are really clear checks that we're doing with the chatbot. And so when writing the script, you can make sure, okay, we want to check in and make sure they remember it. So we're going to ask them questions about that. And then we're going to make sure they accomplish it. So we'll ask questions that are related to that. So you can do some of the designing to reinforce your own business case and the problems that you have. Okay, so looking at the results of this target case study, they did a control group that did not use the chatbot, and they found that 100% of the Mobile Coach participants remembered their starting point. So they remembered, this is the action I'm going to take, compared to 86% of the control group. And then 88% of the chatbot participants remembered the action they committed to after the training were only 68% of the control group. And then this is the big jump where we have 75% of the participants taking action on the training requirement when they used a chatbot, and 55% did that when they didn't. So it was really helpful to get them to actually like go that further step of not just remembering, but also taking action. Okay, so moving forward to the next example here, we have a slightly different use case. So this is supporting frontline workers. And there was a convenience store who had their employees that were working at all hours, and it was really hard to get them trained to take the time out of a busy schedule, especially when we have people working lots of different shifts. So get them trained, but also make sure they're remembering this content and making sure they have all the information they need. And so they tried out a chatbot to see, okay, can we help people who are on the go, working in these convenience stores, get little reminders and reinforce the training content that we're able to provide them. And so what did that look like? So here again, I have one example of what a message looked like. And this is pretty similar to many of the messages in this chatbot, where it was sending information and checking in, asking questions. It was a lot of quiz questions, which for this example helped not only check for them, are people remembering, how are they doing on the quiz, but if they got it wrong, they were also able to educate them. So they could then make sure that people were getting the information they needed when they needed help. So we have our script, and I did anonymize these, where the chatbot says, okay, here's some content. What do you say? Imagine everything. How do you ensure a professional, inviting image for our customers? So then they got 3 examples and they chose which one was the right one. And if they got it right, they got this message. And if they got it wrong, they got this message. So in both cases, they were reminded of the safety guidelines and sent a link to them. Yes, Michael, I just saw your Q&A. Are templates and examples shared by the community of platform users or devised by Mobile Coach? So far, most of the templates are written based on our experience. We do have some that some of our other users have created, but they are, the template library can only be used publicly. So everyone with access to the library can have access to the templates, but within your own folders, we could say. Okay, Vince is gonna answer. No, I'm answering live. Within your own folder, you can have your own templates. So you could create a chatbot and make copies of it. But what I showed you was just the public script library as well. Hopefully that answers. Okay, so back to this use case. Let's see what happened. What were the results? This one, we have a little bit less numbers associated with it. But they were looking to see, okay, what worked and what didn't, so they could improve on this. So I wanted to show you another way of thinking about a chatbot. And for this one, it was really engaging, and it was easier to implement this training versus some of the other trainings that they did, where they have to have people come in on off days or stay late to do that training. So it was really easy because they could just do it on the fly as they were working. It was also a really good fit for their audience. So they wrote a script that really resonated with their audience. They had fun with it. I think there was some kind of punny writing that people really enjoyed. So they got that corporate culture right, and they had really high engagement rates. So a lot of people were answering those quiz questions. But what was difficult is these are part-time workers all using their personal phone. So the regulations around messaging was the difficult part with them when they were creating their project. So that kind of goes back to my slide of when is a reinforcement chatbot right? We want to make sure that people can message and that we have a way of communicating with them. So that could be something to really think through in the beginning of a project. Okay, so those are the 2 use cases. I'm going to pause again. Any other questions? Anything people are thinking before we head over to best practices? Ooh, yes. Okay, Alan, I'm actually going to touch on that in a minute. So I'm going to hold that one because you read my mind. We're getting to that in one of our best practices. So let's move forward. Okay, So my 3 best practices for writing a training reinforcement chatbot. First, we want to design with the outcome and the user in mind. Second, we want to do a lot of iterating. And third, we want to get our audience on board. Okay, so how do we start with the end in mind? When we're designing a chatbot, sometimes it's tempting to just immediately start with, okay, well, we want to send all these messages, so let's just write out the script and build it. But we want to think, what do we need users to accomplish? We want to kind of go bigger picture and say, so for the target use case, we want to make sure they're remembering and applying these principles, these actions that they said they would take. And then you can move forward and write the script. But you need to think of, what is the outcomes we need from the chatbot? What does the user need to accomplish? What do we need to present them with? What information? And then we can write. So we need to start with the end and then start writing. And then I also like to ask, not just what does the project need, but what do the learners need? So sometimes it's really tempting to ask a ton of questions, check in a lot, but that's giving you valuable information. It may not be helpful for your learners to be constantly having these check-ins. Sometimes it is really helpful to have them pause and reflect, which is what the questions can accomplish. But other times it's more helpful for them to send a reminder and just say, hey, here's this content, which may not get you the same data as asking them a question, but it might be more helpful for them to just get that quick information. So we want to balance those two of what does the project need and also what do my learners need and how am I going to best help them through this chatbot. And when we're thinking about writing a chatbot script, so on average, we're seeing reinforcement chatbots are 4 to 8 weeks long, and that depends on the content. So if your content is something that's going to take a little longer to apply, or there's a lot of information there, or it's something that people are really excited about, we can maybe extend to that 8 weeks. There are always exceptions that are much longer, but that's the average. And then we're messaging people 2 times a week on average. So like a Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, we're mixing it up and sending occasional messages during the week. But that's really quick. That's not a lot of content to write. And so that's where it becomes really important to pare it down and think, what is the most valuable thing I can send someone? Okay, and then my next piece of advice is to iterate. We make a lot of updates. So sometimes when you're creating a project, you're just trying to get to the end. You're just trying to say, okay, once we finish, we can move on to the next thing. But I've seen a lot of people who write a script and then just leave it. The best thing to do is to check in at different periods and say, okay, is this working? Let's keep improving. So a chatbot script is never done. We're never just finished with the project. I always suggest make little iterations along the way. Even after you're launching, keep checking in and seeing how the users are doing and how you can improve the conversation. Especially because when we're first designing, we're going to write a script, but that's our best guess of what's going to be useful for the user. So then we can test it and we can put it in other people's hands. And we can say, okay, how does this feel now that we have it on maybe Teams? Are we realizing we need something else? So that's a great place to iterate. And then you get it out to your first users and they're going to give you lots of good feedback. And you're going to see, oh, some of the things that we thought were going to be helpful maybe need tweaking. We need to say it a different way. And then you're going to get to your reporting. So you're just going to regularly probably be sending out this chatbot. Say it's a leadership reinforcement. Every time that training happens, you're just going to send the chatbot out with people. So it might be easy to forget that project. But we're going to want to check regularly to see, okay, are there any other improvements we can make? How else can we keep this going? So iterating is going to help your project stay really strong and continue to best support your users. And then the last one, kind of on Alan's message, is get audience buy-in. And Vince kind of mentioned this as well in his keynote, where this is the most important piece, but sometimes it's something that we forget about until the very end, until we actually need to get people on board. And I also wanted to do a plug. Sterling, I believe today is doing a writing best practices right after this session. And he's going to talk quite a bit about this as well, in more of a writing sense of how can we write to help make this happen. So if you want to learn more about this, I would definitely suggest that. But these are kind of my best practices when it comes to getting audience buy-in. So with a reinforcement project, often we're going to do this at the end of a training. So for example, maybe it's in person or virtual, but instructor led. You get to the last slide and you say, okay, everyone, we've learned a lot today, but now we want to make sure we take it out of the classroom and actually use it in our work. So we've built this training reinforcement bot. It's going to be a little virtual buddy to help you get the content in your brain and take action. So click this button, say hi on Microsoft Teams, and then the conversation will start. It's really easy when you do something like that to rush it, to say, we're on the last slide, let's move fast, or everyone has a meeting in 2 seconds. So you just send that information out really quick, and people maybe don't hear it, or they're like, I'll do that later, and they don't get to it. So it's important to take the time to slowly go through it and then make sure that everyone joins the chatbot. You should also give time for them to ask questions. So this is probably something brand new to all of the learners. And so make sure that they have an opportunity to say, hey, what is it going to do? How is it going to help me? What do the messages look like? How much time am I going to spend? They might have lots of questions, so give them that space. I've also seen people where they just invite once. That can be a mistake. We want to invite people a couple of times. If it's over email especially, that is going to get lost. So if you're just emailing them, maybe send a couple emails, or also in a meeting, say, hey, don't forget to join this. Or again, at the end of the training, say, hey, don't forget to do this. It can also really help if someone like their manager is saying, hey, I heard you got this chatbot to help you with this training, and it's really important for us that you're taking action on that training. So, make sure to join. Having that influence can help people. And then sometimes they're going to, when we're talking about the chatbot, we may just say, it's going to send you questions, and, it's just going to this is what it's going to do. We want to tell about why. Why is it important they join? What is it going to do for them? So, hey, this chatbot is going to send you messages and you should join because it's really going to help you take action. It's going to be influential for your job, or, the reason you started this training. So yeah, give them that big picture of why they should care about it. Okay, and it looks like Vince has added some great suggestions in the chat as well, so thank you. Moving on to our workflow. So when we're building this reinforcement chatbot, how in the world do we do it? Well, here's a little diagram, and as you can see, it's a circle. So I want you to keep working on the project. Again, the iterating, we're going to keep checking in again. And we start with the problem. So what is the business problem? I've harped on that a lot, but what are we trying to solve? We don't just want to do it because it's cool. We want to do it because it's needed. And then how are we going to measure success? What does a successful chatbot look like? What is it going to help us with, and how are we going to measure that? And again, this one, Sterling is doing a metrics chat. So it's about reporting and metrics for a chatbot. So I highly recommend you join that session. I believe it's Wednesday. Vince, would you mind putting the schedule in the chat? And anyone who wants to join one of those, the authoring sessions will be really helpful for more of the tactical piece. Okay, and then thank you. So then we have our script. So once we've got our problems sorted, we're going to start writing, and we're going to say, okay, how often are we going to send people messages? Where are we going to send messages? What content are we sending? And then we'll write all that out once we answer those questions. And then step 3 is configure. So we're going to take our script and put it in our chatbot platform and set up all of the logic to make those messages flow. And a lot of what I've talked about today is more that push content of the chatbot, scheduling things out and sending on specific times. With the reinforcement chatbot, it can also be helpful to have some on-demand info. So we might say, someone might ask, hey, what was that model? Or can you send me that PDF? And we want the chatbot to be able to send them that info. The next step is to test and iterate. So once you've built the chatbot, you're going to want to get on the channel you're using and send yourself the messages, answer the questions, make sure everything is flowing and feeling like a good conversation. And that's, again, a great place to iterate and make improvements. And then the last step is just maintenance. So we're going to look at data. We're going to see how successful is this project so far and how can we improve it to make it better. So that's our workflow that we're going to go through. And hugely important for part of our implementation is where are we going to put this chatbot? So where you put it really matters. We want the chatbot to be somewhere that users are looking at their messages. In many instances, these reinforcement chatbots might be replacing maybe an email notification that used to send them those reminders. And so we want it to be something they're looking at more, or they place higher priority on. So for example, my Slack channel, where we internally communicate at Mobile Coach, I see those notifications and I go look at all of them. So maybe I want the chatbot to be on Slack because that's where people are, or Microsoft Teams, or maybe these people aren't looking at their computer very often. They're all on their phones. So we want the chatbot to be there. And here are 3 channels. I'm not going to talk through these specifically, but just I want you to know that as you're thinking about a different channel, each of them is going to have a slightly different setup. So you're going to create the channel a little differently. How you ask for signups. So in Vince's keynote, he mentioned that a lot of channels don't allow you to just force someone to join the chatbots. Most of them either they require an opt-in, so someone has to like click the link on Teams to join. SMS and Slack have options for a forced join in, but it can be tricky, and we want to tackle like, is that an annoyance for people, or is that going to help them? And then we have some features. So each channel is going to have slightly different formatting and features, and the way that someone can interact with the chatbot will be different. So we want to make sure when we're designing, if we want the chatbot on all of the channels, then we're going to have to make it so the content will work everywhere. But say if we're just doing Teams, then we can format it so it looks really great on Teams and it utilizes all of the cool features that Teams has. Like we can have buttons, so it's really easy for someone to respond. And then the last one is just each of them has some quirks. So you just want to think through, okay, how is my configuration? How is my design going to work with this specific channel or all of the channels? Maybe we need to put it in lots of places. Yes. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on, so I'm racing through this. So please, if you have more questions, start putting them in the Q&A and chat. And Vince and I can talk through them. Or if you want to go back to anything, we'll have time. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to mention is about metrics. So for a training reinforcement chatbot, this is what you can get out of the chatbot. So this is the data that it's capturing and saving for you. You may have pieces that are not chatbot related that you want to check in on. So for example, for a reinforcement chatbot, we may say, we want to check to see how many questions our instructors are getting. So are they getting less questions now that we have the chatbot because it can answer some of those? Or we want to check in, maybe your training is so that someone fills out like a certification. Are people doing that more often? Are they doing it faster? So you can check it against measures outside of the chatbot, but this is what you can measure within. So we can say, okay, how often are people responding to questions? How often are they leaving the chatbot? How often are they getting a question right? So if you send lots of quiz questions, are they getting it right? Are they getting it wrong? Is there a specific topic that someone is more often getting wrong? So maybe that means we need the training or the chatbot to really hit that topic more. Are they completing actions? So we might say, hey, I need you to do this. And then are they self-reporting that they're doing it or not? This is also something where if you want something more than a self-report, maybe we do that measure outside of the chatbot. Again, self-reporting different pieces. So one great thing to self-report is like a story of how are you doing? How are you feeling? Tell me what it's like to do this action. And then the last one is link clicks. So if we send resources, we can track when people are clicking a link. So this is all the data that you can really get out of the chatbot. I should mention, you can see any response that someone is giving back and forth. So we'll see all of that. Yes. Okay. So that's what I've got prepared. So let's look. I see we have some Q&A. Looks like Vince is answering those. But Dawn has, yeah, Vince?
I think you can answer Dawn's. I think that's a
Okay.
good one to answer live.
Okay, so Don said, do you create a different script based on the channel? If so, for the same learning journey? So that really depends on what you're implementing and why. So I have helped with chatbots where we have different scripts based on the channel. So maybe we're doing an SMS one and we're doing a Teams one. And we want with the Teams one to have buttons. We want the formatting to look great in Teams. And so what we do is we actually generally design one conversation. So the conversation's the same. And then we create generally the SMS one first because it's simpler. And then copy it and then add to the Teams one all of the special Teams things. Other times that's not important. Maybe buttons doesn't really matter because of the questions you're doing, or the formatting would look good no matter what. So it really depends on your audience and your needs of whether or not you do want to design twice. Any other questions? Anything people would like elaborated on?
I think you did a really good job. Corey, I don't know how you can read the chat and present at the same time. You really impressed me. I don't possess this ability.
Sometimes I think I should multitask less though, because then I always have my eye open for the chat. I should probably focus on what I'm saying, but thank you. Well, if there's no other questions, I did just want to mention that we are having a conference special on the author licenses. So if you're wanting to give that a try and start building chatbots for new authors, they're half off until the 10th. So we have a little bit of time. And if you're interested in that, you can contact me or Vince or email sales@mobilecoach.com. And I'm going to put that in the chat. And then the last thing, I did just want to plug again some of the other sessions that are coming up. So I mentioned that a little bit. I'll put that in the chat again for the schedule. Right after this is writing best practices. And then we have our group project. Measuring success is Wednesday. And then we have a knowledge base. So how did the chatbot answer questions? So those are the 3 authoring sessions. And then tomorrow I will be talking about new hires. And on Wednesday, I'll be doing performance support. And then we have our incredible clients who are going to share their real experiences. So I think that'd be incredibly helpful if you're interested in this reinforcement. I'm trying to think. Emma does learning transfer. So that'll be tomorrow. And then Kaiser, there's some reinforcement with Kaiser's on Wednesday. So maybe join one of those. And there'll also be the recordings for all of these sessions as well. Okay.
Hey, Corey, so Jay asks, can you talk about ways to structure the reinforcement chatbot so they don't seem pushy or annoying?
Yes. So I have found that you can sometimes be pushier than I think. I'm pretty sensitive to that. I don't want to bother people. But if you stick to twice a week, generally we found that is not too often where you're getting people's attention, but you're not being too pushy. But one way, if you want to send more content, is to ask users. So you can always say, hey, how often do you want messages? Or is there a good time? Because sometimes the messaging might just be at the wrong time. And so it can be difficult for people to pay attention to it. So we can have them self-choose what they need and fit those needs. Alternatively, you can have someone say, hey, I want less. I want to opt into a smaller experience. And I would say the tone and also helps with this a lot. So if you're encouraging and you're supportive, that can make a difference for users. And then my last thought is, how helpful is this content? If I'm receiving content that is a 10 for me, every single message is vitally important. You could probably message me every day and I would be very happy to see those. But if this is something that I don't care about as much or isn't as important to me anymore because maybe it's been too long, and so it's harder for me to connect with it, that's when it starts to feel pushy. So we want to make sure that the need for a user is meeting what we're sending. So we don't want to oversend just to oversend. We want to make sure that it's valuable content. Yeah.
I also might add that personalization is really helpful. So to the extent you can design your chatbot to know the user and send. So for example, let's say that your chatbot covers 10 topics and you ask the user, out of these 10 topics, which ones would you like to hear about? If you don't ask that and they only care about 2 or 3 of the topics, then it might feel less annoying, but it just might not feel relevant when they're getting messages about the topics that they don't care about. So if you ask them and they say, well, I care about topic A, D, and F, when you send that message, then it will feel a lot more personalized.
Yes, such a good point. Okay, anyone else? Any other questions before we say goodbye?
Great job, Corey.
Thank you. All right, well, we're around if anyone wants to chat throughout the conference and see us for our next sessions. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.